So it's finally time. Cyberpunk 2077's patch 1.5 is finally here, and here. You can actually download the update right now on all systems. For next-gen consoles, it seems like it's going to be a little over 60 gigabytes in size, and for PC, it's going to be about 40 gigabytes in size. So basically, you're downloading an entire new game here. And actually, for PS5 users, you are quite literally downloading a new game. This will not be an update to your previous copy of Cyberpunk, but rather a separate download that you're going to have to manually start by going into your library. It's still free, you don't have to buy anything, but just note, if you're on PS5, don't just hope this will happen for you. You have to do some stuff here. And in this video, what I'm going to do is explain to you what's different on a high level, the overview of what you can expect and what you should go try out. I'm going to have an in-depth video after spending a ton of time in this update and actually getting through the nitty-gritty. There's actually a ton of secrets in this update, but also, as we'll talk about in this video, there's some surprising changes and changes that won't benefit everyone. So depending on which copy of the game you have, you'll actually have some variances here, which is going to be pretty interesting and pretty important, as well as, again, there's a ton of secrets and some things not even mentioned during their live stream that are only found in the patch notes, which, let's be honest, you probably don't feel like reading all of this. So to kick things off, this patch basically has 3 different parts, and not all platforms are getting all of the parts, so pay attention here. If you are on a next-gen system, the PS5 or Xbox Series S/X, you'll get almost everything. Xbox Series S users technically get gypped on one part, but the 3 new things are the new patch 1.5 itself, the next-gen upgrade, so the game will now run natively on those consoles and has a variety of visual and other improvements, and 4 new DLCs. If you're on next-gen, you'll basically get all of this new content. If you're on PC, you'll just get the update as well as the 4 new DLCs. You don't actually get the next-gen version, obviously. And naturally, last-gen consoles get the short end of the stick here in more ways than one, though. Obviously, they're not getting the next-gen upgrade, but they are getting all of the new DLCs, although they are only getting parts of patch 1.5. It's not totally clear how much was cut out here. CDPR put up this graph where it basically describes how improved crowd reactions are not coming to the last gen of consoles. So if you play on an Xbox One or PS4, you're not getting some of the AI updates. They just listed improved crowd reactions. That's incredibly vague. There's a ton of updates and changes around AI and even several around the crowds and NPC behavior around you. So maybe it really is just this one specific thing, but I have a feeling there's more to that. And of course, this is the first time they've actually not had content going to the last gen of consoles, which is a trend that's likely to continue. In a way, the update getting at least slightly gimped as they can actually get all of these features and that old hardware. During their live stream earlier today, they actually mentioned some of the memory streaming issues just being too much of a restriction. So with the next gen update on a surface level, this is really big. It makes it so that Cyberpunk 2077 just runs natively on your next gen system. If you have an Xbox Series X or S, or if you have a PS5, the game is now actually running on that system. Where before what was happening was, if you're on a PS5, let's say, you were using backwards compatibility to play the PS4 version, which means that there's just going to be a ton of upgrades and changes because you are now fully taking advantage of your system's hardware. It'll now be closer to the PC version with better crowds, better visuals, and a bunch of other background improvements. Although more explicitly, the game now has 2 new settings, a performance mode and a visual mode on the Xbox Series X and PS5. You can choose performance and you'll get the overall upgrades as well as 60 FPS, or if you choose the visual mode, you'll actually get ray tracing. The background footage you're seeing is all performance mode gameplay, so that's why you'll notice not as visual of an upgrade, but better FPS. Unfortunately, Xbox Series S users actually get gypped here as you just have a 30 FPS mode with dynamic resolution scaling. You get the other benefits of the update overall as well as the DLCs, but you're not getting 60 FPS and you are not getting any ray tracing. PS5 also has some pretty notable exclusives like adaptive trigger support. The controller speaker is now actually going to be used like for phone calls, as well as haptics during romance and other scenes, but literally during romance scenes in Cyberpunk, if you're on a PS5, your controller will vibrate in certain ways. This is actually the dev that added in. He seems very happy about this. But also, as I mentioned before, there's some drawbacks to the PS5 version, not only upgrades. You also have to download a new version of the game, and sadly, since you are not updating the old version and downloading a new version, this means that you're going to have to not only transfer over your saves manually, but also your trophies or achievements achievements won't actually carry over. So if you platinum Cyberpunk on the PS4 version and are now playing on PS5, you don't have any trophies anymore. You have to redo all of that. And although the next-gen update isn't coming to PC users, there are some notable upgrades. There's actually a benchmarking tool now, which is pretty handy, as well as AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution support was added. So if you are trying to use ray tracing on a AMD graphics card, this can certainly help with your FPS and is definitely worth testing out. The 4 new DLCs added are pretty interesting. These are totally free and will be downloaded to the game with this update, but you have to activate them yourself. Character editing is finally here. You can edit your appearance in the mirror of your apartment. This is the full-on character editor like you get at the beginning of the game largely. And although that's the core of this new DLC, this update overall also adds in a bunch of additional ways to edit your character. You can have red lipstick now, you can make some other modifications that you couldn't previously, as well as new options in some of the old categories. There are new poses in photo mode. Some of these are just for you, V. Some of these are for Johnny when you're doing that Johnny flashback scene. So when you're actually playing as him and you go into photo mode, you could do specific poses for him. What's new at Wilson's is a pretty interesting one. It'll actually overhaul and give a bit of a visual upgrade to Wilson's next to your apartment, but also it would actually add 2 new weapons to the game. A new AR with the Umbra, as well as the Guillotine, which is a SMG. They look cool, but they're really just 2 new typical power weapons. They're going to pop up specifically at Wilson's all the time, but also will be distributed throughout the world. So you'll find other places with these. It's just consistently here. And fun fact, even though this one's kind of boring because they're just power weapons, or at least to me, those are the least interesting category of weapons in Cyberpunk, there's probably more coming. Based off past leaks, there's actually weapon packs for all of the weapon categories, so hopefully more on the horizon. And this also brings 4 new scopes into the game, as well as 10 new muzzle attachments. And the biggest DLC by far is apartments. This will make it so you can not only actually customize the visuals of V's apartment, that being the traditional one, for 10,000 eddies, and you have 6 different options to choose from, each of these being 10,000, although naturally you could only apply 1 at a time, and you can do this via V's in-apartment computer, or alternatively, using V's in-apartment computer, or by just going to these new locations, you could actually buy 4 new apartments, and you could buy all 4 for a total of 5 apartments for you personally. These are all in different districts, they are at different price points, and with vastly different themes. It seems like they're majorly focused around some of the various things of that district and kind of going to align with how you roleplay in this game, like a corporal apartment. And interior-wise, these are very, very different. But then let's transition to the most important section here, and that is what is actually going on with this major new update, patch 1.5 in its entirety. Your apartment will actually now have new interactions and reasons to actually go there outside of just customizing it. Like sleeping will actually give you plus 20% experience gain for your skills for an hour, as well as taking a shower will allow you to regen health during combat for an hour. AI got a bunch of improvements to be smarter and more reactive, partially with combat AI. It seems like they now have, to some degree, more tools in their arsenal. They'll notice when you're flanking them, they're going to rely on cover more, they will dodge, block, and reload better and smarter than before, and overall they'll be a larger threat to you, but these behaviors will also vary from faction to faction. The animals, for example, may be more reckless and aggressive compared to other factions that'll play safer and lean back. All the various factions have different variables for their ranged versus melee AI. Followers are stronger and they can't die, but if they take enough damage, they'll be temporarily disabled. Crowds no longer despawn when combat starts and you look away, as well as if you actually point guns into crowds, sometimes certain NPCs will actually react and fire back at you or react in general. Once combat starts, those random NPCs in cars will actually do things now. They could go into this almost rage or panic mode where they'll actually just start driving erratically, they might run over other pedestrians, smash into other cars, or even jump onto the sidewalk to get away from you, or they could just go unconscious. I really don't get this change at all. I don't know how these two are even remotely similar. I guess they have like a panic attack and just pass out temporarily. As well as driving on the player side has been completely overhauled. Cars feel different, more weighty, there's clutches, as well as a ton of new mechanics around this. You can do burnouts, donuts, and even drifting to some degree, as well as motorcycles have neon rims. The perk tree is completely overhauled. You actually got all of your perk points refunded to you, so if you play an existing character, you'll notice all of your perks refunded, as well as a ton of new and completely changed perks. This also applies to clothing item mods. Mods got completely reworked with clothing, and all of them are going to be removed from your existing clothing, so you have to redistribute them, as well as certain clothing mods will actually only be applicable to certain pieces of clothing going forward. An example, Evasion is kind of removed from this game and is now completely different in 2 separate stats. You can now cancel the reveal position hack if you have a certain type of cyberware or by damaging the netrunner that's doing this. Enemy NPCs can actually spawn with optical camo. You cannot use cyber psychosis on cyber cyber psychos anymore. You can actually text some of your romance partners, and there's some additional interactions at those romance partners' apartments, like sleeping with them. You can reject phone calls from people you don't want, and you can actually make it so certain people around certain gigs will never call you. Fixers now have a reputation system and a set amount of jobs available at one time, not everything available right off the bat. The more jobs you do for them, the more rep you gain, the more jobs you unlock, and at the end, if you complete every job, you actually unlock a special item from that fixer. Weather is going to vary more often and more consistently now. There's less loot in the world, there'll be less loot lying around, as well as they're actually dropping support for the NVIDIA 700 series of GPUs and Windows 7. The Windows 7 support drops on June 15th. And that's really just some of the big stuff. There's actually a lot more. There's some stuff we've seen in the gameplay that I want to further investigate as I get into this, as well as there's actually a bunch of secret interactions. Even just in the patch notes, they mention how some of the secret interactions or quests added won't be on the old gen of console. So seemingly they were somewhat meaty that they couldn't be added due to the limitations on last gen. They're only on PC and next gen, as well as secret bug fixes. They mention how the bug fixes in the patch notes are not comprehensive. So even if the bug fixes look a bit smaller than they did compared to that epic one we got with patch 1.3, that might actually be reflective of reality. It'll take several days to test all of this. I'm going to have a full deep dive video on what patch 1.5 brings to the table, how good it actually is coming. Until then, you could try this out. You could actually try it out for free for 5 hours if you want to. Hopefully you found this informative. Hopefully it gives you a nice overview of what is actually new, what is actually added, and what you should be trying out at least initially. But until next time, I thank you all again for watching, and I hope to see you all later.